Hi, so as that intro made abundantly clear, my name's Harry, and this is going to be a full tutorial of how you can actually do this. If you do plan on doing this, I'd make sure you watch the whole video first because it is not very easy, I must be honest, especially if you're a beginner. You might be able to pull it off. I mean, I did this on the Switch 1 when I was just a beginner with soldering, but like I say, it is very difficult. You know, you're risking ruining the controllers, but then again, the only way to get better is to practice, so completely up to you. There's a high chance you break your controllers, but if that's something you can afford, then go ahead. I've also put a link to an eBay seller that sells the exact type of LED that you'll need. I recommend buying quite a few because, like I say, I've done this quite a few times, and even I burnt out a few of these LEDs just by holding the soldering iron on them for a little bit too long. The LEDs themselves are quite cheap, so I would say get at least like 20. Like if you want to be able to do this yourself, especially if you're just starting out, I would say get about 20, and then there's no way you're going to run out. You'll definitely have enough then. My camera doesn't pick up the colours perfect. They are kind of matched about as close as you're going to get to the red and blue controllers. Before I show you how this is done, it is a huge hassle. So if you watch this video, which I encourage you to do, see if you think you might be able to do this yourself. And if you can't, I'm going to be selling this pair, including 9 others, so 10 in total, on my Etsy page, which is in the description. And because I'm selling these, I decided to do it with a brand new pair of Joycons, so you're welcome. Because of that, I just wanted to make sure that they were actually working out the box and there weren't any other faults that I was missing. But no, brand new from Nintendo, so these things are working fine. Starting off with the blue controller, there's like a hidden little panel on these controllers that makes them look like there's less screws than there actually are. So you kind of just got to peel that away. It's like held in with clips. And once it's out, there are 2 screws underneath it. One of them is a tri-wing screw like these 2 on the other side. And the other one is a Phillips screw that you'll need to take out with a different screwdriver. Then you can actually start to pull the controller to pieces. I mean, that makes it sound like you can be really violent and rip it to shreds. Just nice and gently, just pull it apart. And if you're anything like me, this piece will come out all by itself. It's the latch that holds the controller to the magnets. That just comes out nice and easy. Then the ZR button. You kind of have to push this into the controller a bit and like maybe get your nail under it a little bit. So you're pushing it in more so than pulling it away, and then it will eventually just come loose. Once that's disconnected, put it off to the side. Now you can like disconnect this entire back piece. So the wire you're disconnecting here, in case you were wondering, is the HD rumble thing, like the little motor. So make sure you don't break that when you're disconnecting it. Once you get to this next part, you might want to pause the video. There are 6 screws here that you want to disconnect. Those 2 in the top right are going to remove this piece that I've highlighted. That'll just come out by itself. This orange piece is actually a ribbon cable that's connected below this big section. So when you remove that bigger section, make sure you don't pull the orange bit too hard as it's still connected and you might break it. Here you can see me removing that ribbon cable from its little slot, so just make sure that you do that and push it off to the side before you lift out this entire battery tray. As you can see, the L button came out just there, that's fine. It's connected on little springs that probably aren't going to go anywhere. And here you can just gently remove the battery. And here you might want to pause again because there are a lot of screws and a lot of cables. That bluish looking cable is actually just a joystick. You don't necessarily need to remove that one, but I do just so that we don't snap it. If you're unfamiliar with those ribbon cables, the bits that I highlighted as little blue rectangles, they just kind of flip up so that you can disconnect the cables. Just be really gentle with them as they're very fragile. What we're actually unscrewing here is the main motherboard of the controller from the front piece of the shell. And the reason that we're doing that is because the blue piece that we want to take out that has the lights in it, you've kind of like got to wiggle it from underneath the main board. So we need to loosen the board, take out the screws for that blue piece, and then we can take it out from underneath there. I think that the key to this part is just really being as gentle as you can. See the way I'm kind of just moving the board slightly out the way? And with all the screws out, that blue piece comes out pretty easy. But again, just be careful. There's a lot of latches, a lot of cables, and a lot of pieces of board that could be broken here. You're now very close to being at the LEDs, so there's just 4 golden Phillips screws that go along this little grey piece. They all need to come out. Before you lift off this grey piece, on one end of it there is a spring and a little blue piece. They are again the release latch for the Joycon. Just be careful that that spring doesn't like fly off, because that happened to me a few times and it is very difficult to find if that thing goes on the floor. Once it's out, carefully put all those to the side, maybe put them on something magnetic with that spring. And then you can take out that middle section. It comes out very easily. It's the little sensor for the mouse mode. Then after that, this takes a lot of wiggling, so please just take your time here. I get the sense that these things are going to break really easy over the course of the Joy-Con's life. Just as gently as you can, try and wriggle it out. I find pushing the buttons from the other side actually kind of helps. Bear in mind, this is all one big piece of board, so don't try and rip each side out individually, it's all attached to itself. That's it for the disassembly. This is the piece that we've been trying to get to. This is the bit where all the lights are soldered onto the board. I'm going to be using a microscope to do this. It's not extremely expensive. I'll put a link in the description to the one that I have. However, I wouldn't say it's strictly necessary. It definitely makes it much easier though. And as I mentioned, when I did this on the Switch 1, I did not use a microscope. I just kind of went for it. And, you know, it turned out okay, but like I say, so much easier with one of these things. I'd also say a lot of good light would help. I'm also just holding this down with a little bit of blue electrical tape. The reason is, otherwise, while you're soldering, it's kind of just going to move all over the place. And this means you don't need any kind of like vise or anything, because this thing isn't very heavy. It'll just stay in place with that tape. So I want to explain this part as simply as possible. These blue symbols that I've highlighted, just imagine those as arrows. On the back of your LED, there's going to be little tiny green arrows that need to be pointing in the same direction as the blue ones. Your LEDs might also have a green bar that just needs to be on the same side as the direction of the arrow. Those pink rectangles are the old LEDs. They're what we're going to be getting rid of. And in order to do that, we're going to be heating up these little red sections on each side of those LEDs. So we're going to just be touching our soldering iron to each side over and over again until eventually the old LED comes loose and you can place your new LED in there and set it into the solder. So this is just a really brief and poorly filmed example of how you're going to be doing that. So you want to be much careful than I am here while I'm also trying to hold the camera and just kind of heat up that solder as best as you can. Now your soldering iron might not have a big display like this, but you want to set it to a similar temperature. Yours might just be on a dial on the iron itself. One more piece of advice that I would give for this is the back of your LED may not have any of those symbols on. There's a small chance that the front of the LED will have a piece of green on one side of it that you need to look for, and that will be the bit that points in the same direction as the blue arrow that I showed you before. You may also want to add some of your own solder to Nintendo's solder, just because theirs seems to have a really high melting point and makes it difficult to do. So I would say as you're going, maybe every time you connect an LED, connect it up to the battery so you can test it as you see here. Hopefully you won't have any errors, but if you do, chances are you've just slightly misaligned it to the solder pads and you just need to give it another little push onto the board. If you were brave enough to make it to this part, honestly congratulations, because that is not an easy task to complete and you've really done something impressive here. Now I'm actually going to walk you through how to reassemble these things, because I feel like when I was learning how to do stuff like this, no one would ever show you how to put things back together. They'd just say watch the video in reverse, which always would confuse me greatly, but maybe that's just me. So the first step is to put those back in as you just saw. They just slip back in nice and easy, and so does that like a little mouse sensor. Then put that spring back in and align the little blue pushy piece, I'm going to call it, over the spring and into the grey part, as you can see here as well. I did realise I was holding it upside down, so just make sure you're holding that the right way and then push it into place, and then you can kind of like immediately put a screw into that to hold it down. Then, if you remember, it was actually 4 screws that hold this piece into place, so those 4 golden Phillips screws need to go back in. So if you just kind of hold this piece back into place against the motherboard now, you can reconnect 2 of those ribbon cables back to the board. And the reason you want to do this before we screw anything in is just that you can plug the battery back in, and again, just make sure everything's working now that you've put that little blue piece back together. So that's all I'm doing here, just plugging the battery back in, holding down the sync button, and making sure that those lights come on. And once you've done that, just follow exactly where I'm putting the screws back in here. These are just the ones that we took out for the motherboard and the blue piece. And if you haven't already, you can also put all the ribbon cables back in. Make sure you reconnect the Joycon ribbon cable if you took that out to begin with. If you watch close enough here, you'll see that I actually forgot to do that when I was filming this. I then had to disassemble it all off camera and put it all back together again. So make sure you reconnect that. Then you can reconnect the battery and just kind of place the battery shell back into place, so that entire middle section can just gently go back into place. So here you can see me screwing back into place that little orange piece that was still connected to the board below. You might need to use your tweezers to properly get that back into place. Before you do anything else here, make sure you connect that L button and make sure it feels nice and clicky when you push it in. Then for the next minute or so, you're just going to screw back in these screws as I do here. Next up, you can put in that little rounded black piece. That's held in by 2 screws from before, if you remember. And once that's on, you can put this next button back into place, which you just kind of push back in as you did when you took it out. Then this piece just places in there, no screws or anything. That's again the latch for releasing the Joycon. Connect back up the back piece with its little connector. That'll connect your HD rumble back up. And then this is going to feel a little bit finicky, it's kind of tricky to do, but just gently push all this back together and eventually you'll feel little clicks. Then the 2 tri-wing screws on this side and the one that goes under that little concealed cover thing. And the Phillips screw on the back as well. In my experience, this next piece goes in with basically no hassle. It's just little tiny clips, and as long as you've aligned it properly, it goes together, and that's the entire controller back together. And at this stage, your blue LEDs are there, you're halfway there, and it's time to move on to the other half. So while technically this is almost the exact same process, I'm still just going to show it anyway, just because, again, when I was starting out, I really appreciated when people went into depth with stuff like this. So pull off that back cover, you've got the 1 Phillips screw and the 3 tri-wing screws. Then once again, without being too rough, just pull this thing apart. Take out that cable for the HD rumble motor and the little latch for the Joycon. Then the trigger can come off. And just like on the other controller, you might want to pause the video here. These are all the screws that you need to take out. Those 2 in the bottom right this time are going to pull off this little black piece. All the other screws are what's holding in the rest of this huge big battery cover piece. And of course, you need to be careful of that little orange ribbon cable, so make sure that that doesn't snap when you pull the rest of the board up. You then need to disconnect the battery and put it off to the side. Very similar again, you need to take out all these screws except one of these is now hidden by a ribbon cable. The ribbon cables you want to disconnect are here. Again, the blue one is just for the joystick, so that's up to you if you want to take that apart. Now again, you're just kind of wriggling this until eventually the red piece is going to come away from that board. You can try and lift the board up a little bit if that helps, because again that's loose now, and eventually that piece will just come out. Now just like on the blue piece, there's 4 golden Phillips screws that you need to take out of this. And remember, once you do, that grey piece is going to come loose, and there is a really bouncy spring under there that you need to make sure doesn't fly across the room. There you can see it on the left. And just remove that sensor for the mouse piece, and then again really carefully take out this huge board that's got the LEDs in the middle. I really don't feel like there's much else I can say about the soldering itself, so it's just you need to just repeat the exact process you did with the blue piece, making sure everything's pointing in the right direction. And eventually you'll get these lovely nice new LEDs on your board that look exactly like this. And if you do get to here, that's like almost all the hard parts completely out the way. You just need to reassemble one more controller and you are completely done. Well, you know, unless you're me and then you need to go and edit an entire video about this. So first up, just shimmy that board back into place and put the little mouse sensor back in. Then remember the spring and align the red pushy piece back into place with the grey holdy piece. And yes, they are their official terms. To get this piece fully back together, 4 golden screws back into place. Make sure that the SL and SR buttons still feel nice and clicky, and that the release latch pushes just like it did before. Now if you want to here, you can plug the ribbon cables back in before you put any screws in, like we did on the blue piece to test it's working, but I'm pretty sure at this point that this was working, so I wriggled it back into place and put a couple of the screws in just to hold the board down. Then I connected all the ribbon cables back up, this time including the joystick. And remember, there's a screw under one of these ribbon cables that needs to go in first, so just copy what I did here. At this stage I finally decided to test the battery, just to make sure that the lights definitely are working, and yeah, they were. So I just moved that back out the way again for a second, and you can just follow me putting these screws back into the board. And then if you're certain that all the ribbon cables and screws are back in place, then you can plug the battery case back in. And before you screw it down, just push the springs back into the right place for the L button. Then just follow as I do and put these screws back into their correct places. Then being very careful, put that orange ribbon cable back into its place. That can be quite tricky, you might want to use some tweezers, but once it's in, you can put the screw back in. Then that piece that's held in by the 2 screws, that can go back in as well. And after that you can put your trigger back on, again just pushing kind of down and into the controller and make sure that you're in the right place over that little metal piece. Then plug the battery back in and the rumble motor. Then it's time to clip the entire controller back together. And for a final time, remember there's 1 Phillips screw here. I don't understand why that is. And 3 tri-wing screws that all need to go back in. And of course after that, the very final piece, that little black piece that goes on the outside of the controller. And that's it, you're completely done. You will never have to see those horrible yellow LEDs ever again. And just as I turn the lights out here, you can kind of see how this looks so good in person. It's still not quite picking it up just as well on the camera, but it looks really nice and really clean, and it just adds that nice extra little subtle vibe to the controllers. Not that I will get to enjoy that though, as I'm putting these straight back away and they're going straight on that Etsy store, so link in description, you know what I'm talking about. Here you'll see the real hardest part of this tutorial, which is finding out how the fuck you put this box back together. Good enough. Now, I've seen a lot of people talk about the old ones of these on the Switch 1 and how they were concerned at how bright they would be, because blue LEDs are just much brighter than the original colours that were in the Switch controller. To combat that, I would say when you're actually looking at them, when you're actually doing this, it is quite bright, but once it's all connected back together inside the controller, we have this kind of like subtle plastic that goes over the cover. So it is still slightly brighter than what you might be used to, but I think it's a really nice tone and it fits really well. And I don't think that it's going to be blinding anyone anytime soon. So if 10 of you even watch this, there will be some of these on that Etsy store that I mentioned. So I don't think I've seen anyone else do this yet with these controllers. So if you've been waiting for this video, I really hope this helped you out, because it is a different type of LED. And this helpful person on Reddit actually told me what type of LEDs these were, because I thought I'd figured it out and I didn't. Turned out that I just completely misunderstood how to identify these tiny little LEDs. But I literally can't say anything else about these. I have been rambling on for far too long, so. I do have other videos like this. I'm making some more custom Joycon stuff, some more Switch stuff. So if you're a huge nerd with no social life, you should consider subscribing. But anyway, thanks for watching.